7 years ago, I made the trip the other direction, from Tangiers to Spain. I was 13. A group of my friends, all very young, said, "Let's go to Spain, life is better there." So I said, "Okay, let's go."
Muad Barada is now 20 years old and lives in Manresa, about 60 kilometres from Barcelona. Today he's on his way back from vacation in Tangiers, his hometown which he left as a child. Muad was one of the first children to risk life and limb to cross the Straits of Gibraltar. Like so many other kids, he left Morocco hidden between the axles of a bus. Muad recalls the day he and his friends risked their lives to come to Europe, hidden under a truck in the hold of a ferry.
There were 5 others and me. I rode in an incredible spot. You could hardly fit a bottle of water in the space I was in. About 30 centimeters by 1 meter. It was easy to climb into, but it was so cold down there your body starts to swell. That was when I started realizing my stomach was practically scraping the ground, and my back was pressed up against the bar above me. So I tried to wriggle out and saw that it wasn't easy. Just the slightest slip of the hand and my head would have been under the wheels. You can't imagine what it's like to make a trip like that. It's horrible. You don't even see things like that in the movies.
In Sharm Ben Debane, a Tangiers shantytown, the market is closing as Muad passes through. Ever since he was granted a legal work permit in Spain, he vacations in Morocco once a year. Muad's family lives in a house which, by local standards, is one of the better ones. Their son's arrival is reason for celebration.
The first time Muad called us after he left, we held a big celebration because the whole family was so happy. We thought he might be dead. When he called, it was like a rebirth. He'd been born again. The first days after he left, his mother was sick with grief. She spent all day and all night crying. And when I told her not to cry, she would say he was dead, that he died under a truck or a bus, and that they'd thrown his body into the sea. She just cried, and there was no way to console her.
Leaving your family at 13 is very hard. You don't have to do it. All you have to do is close your eyes and try to imagine what it's like. It's hard to imagine. It's really hard.
The next day, Muad and his brother went out for a walk in the neighbourhood's narrow streets. Sharm Ben Debane sprang up on the outskirts of Tangiers in the 60s. Hundreds of thousands of peasants, impoverished by the government's agrarian policies, crowded into slums like Sharm Ben Debane. Most families in the area have more than 5 children, and most of the young people here are unemployed. Everyone in Sharm Ben Debane knows some child who are stowed away to Europe under a truck. Those who return with residence papers are neighbourhood heroes. Morocco is a very young country. Almost half the population is under 15. The country also has the highest child labour rate in northwestern Africa. Legally, children under 15 are not allowed to work, but the law isn't enforced.
When young men go there, all they think about is having money in a car. They want to make money fast. They don't want to wait till they're 40 like here. Young men that come back from Spain, Belgium or Holland come back in cars, designer clothes. So the young people here want the same thing, and they want everything fast. That's why the solution for those kids is to cross the strait.
Abd Ali is 14 and earns 2,000 pesetas, approximately $11 a week, wages which keep his family afloat. In Morocco, his job is not considered child exploitation. It's seen as helping out at home and learning.
When he came here, he knew nothing, but he wanted to learn. When you take computer classes, you pay for them, don't you? We let him work here and he learns at the same time, so he can become a skilled worker. After that, he'll go off on his own. The truth is, he's the one to benefit, not us.
I couldn't go to school because we were from the country and we were little. We worked as shepherds. When we came here, we were already too old to study, and they wouldn't let us go into the school. My father said it was better to learn a trade than to sit around and do nothing.
La seguridad de los padres es tener varios niños porque no hay ningún instrumento financiero, ningún instrumento social de protección del adulto.
Parent security depends on having lots of children because there are no pension plans, no social protection for adults who can no longer work. A child who begs for alms knows that whatever he gets will help his parents. If he sells cigarettes in the streets, it's to help his family. Since Spain is so close to Morocco, crossing the strait is not a problem. What it means is security for the family's future.
But the country's young population is in fact a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it is enormous potential for growth, but on the other, there are far too few schools. Dana is an NGO in Tangiers. Its aim is to train teenagers who have been excluded from the school system and society and help them regain their self-esteem. These youngsters are either from poor families or have ended up scraping a living on the streets of Tangiers.
Les enfants de la rue ne sont que les symptômes d'une société qui est malade. Parce que
street kids are a symptom of a sick society. Right now at the Dana home we have 40 kids between 8 and 12 years old who have never been to school. We're in a city, a big city. These aren't kids from rural areas. There have never been the infrastructures needed in big cities for ensuring that children enroll in schools and attend regularly. The government has failed miserably as far as educational and social programs go.
Donc, je veux dire que l'État, il est en faillite complètement sur l'accompagnement éducatif et social.
Achur is 16 and goes to Dana every day. He has 11 brothers and sisters and he dropped out of school because he was bored. Like so many other kids, he doesn't know how to read or write, and his aspirations are the same as hordes of children in Tangiers.
Para el tangerino España es Barcelona, no es Madrid.
For people in Tangiers, Spain is Barcelona, not Madrid. Spain is Catalonia for them, not Castile. We celebrate Barcelona's victories here in Tangiers as if they were our own. Why? Because we've had a lot of immigrants from Catalonia here, and from Spain in general after the Spanish Civil War. This immigration had a strong cultural and political impact on our whole country, but especially on Tangiers.
Achur lives in Medina. From Monday to Friday he works as a carpenter in Dana, but at the weekends he goes down to the port to try and find some space between the axles of a truck that can take him to Spain.
There are jobs in Spain and they pay very well. Workers have rights there. They don't suffer and they don't get hurt like here. I've already made it there once. It took a long time for us to get to Algeciras and I was tired and bored. I thought the bus was already outside Algeciras, so I came out, but instead we were still in the port. The police caught me and took me back to Tangiers.
At night, the port of Tangiers comes alive with a strange nightlife. Dozens and dozens of children are drawn there. This scene is a nightly ritual. Young kids sneaking into the restricted port area, running between the trucks and looking for hiding spots under trailers is part of a typical night in the Tangiers port.
We hide over there on the jetty. We can see the buses drive in from there.
You have to be careful.
Because there are police patrols. It's easier to get in when the parking lot is full, or when the king visits Tangiers, for example. There are hardly any police in the port, so you can get in very easily then. Also during Ramadan, when the police leave to break their fast, you have to know when the best time is to take advantage of it.
Like every other Saturday, Achur sneaks into the port and disappears among all the other kids. But today the police are working hard. The presence of TV cameras has caused the police to beef up the number of agents on patrol. The kids flee from the police. If they're caught, they'll be beaten.
They hit us. They beat us hard. When they push us into the car, they beat us with rubber sticks and then take us to headquarters. They lock us in a cold room and leave us until the next shift comes on duty. Then they let us go. Every time I say, I'll never go to that port again. But as soon as I forget what happened, I try again.
I don't know a single person from Tangiers who doesn't dream of crossing the strait. Everyone wants to go somewhere. But this is common to all border regions. What I think is peculiar about Tangiers is that from a social point of view, the North has turned its back on this region for such a long time that everyone here thinks that just by crossing the strait they can get a better life.
The abandoned Tangier station, very close to the port, also has a sad life of its own. Dozens of young kids barely survive, living between the train tracks. Most of them are from outside Tangiers. As they sit around a supper of scraps from the trash, they're united by a common goal.
I want to go to Barcelona. I want to work, get legal working papers, help my parents and my family. I also want a better life, to make my way in life, become an honest man, understand? Respectable, and not have to rob or be bad. I want to behave well with the Spaniards, have a good relationship.
Meanwhile, not far from the station, a bus is parked outside one of the luxury hotels. In just a few hours, it will be leaving for Spain. The teenagers start hanging out around the hotel parking lot, drawn like moths to a flame. The first kid seen scurrying about is a sign that the night is going to be a long one. The parking lot security guard is an expert in what he calls mice. That is, small kids who try to stow away under the bus.
¿Cuántos vienen cada noche? ¿Uno o dos? ¿Cómo uno o dos? Tanto a mí. ¿Cuántos? Aquí más de 30.
They have group strategies. The kids on the right distract the guard while the others sneak out under the front part of the bus. As the night wears on, there are more and more kids hidden under the bus. Right now there are at least 5, some of them in places where their lives are in danger.
حاجة فرموكو ضرب فوق الكاردة ومع الشيفور باقي ما مديماريش نعس فوق الكاردة حنت الكاردة كدور هكا والكاميو داير ما مديماريش فاش الكاميو ديمارا غيمشي كاميو الكاردة دارت يشدو الحوايج ودور راسو هكا ضرباتو شي حديدة ولا راسو داخل ربطاتو تحت البنواس ودازهم فوق ما يقسموه النعاس هذا واخا نعس ماشي ناس اي رموكا راه كتهز الرويد دابا حنا كنضربوا في الساسيه كاين يشير ما كيهزود كيهزوا الرويد كيخرفوا الرويد كيصونجيو الرويد وكتصيد فيهم غيهزوا الرويد كيجمعوا الرويد
Atravesar el estrecho no es ese riesgo de ir hacia la muerte, hacia la desaparición, porque se hace ese gesto
For them, crossing the strait is not risking your life and facing death, it's an act of helping, of trying to save their families. So it isn't an individual selfish act, it's one that elevates them, places them on a higher spiritual rung in the ladder to eternal life after death.
The final attempts to find a place under the bus take place with the break of dawn. It's hard to know how many kids have made it. A little later, the driver makes a routine check. Finally, 8 boys come out from under the bus.
Es necesario porque aquí no hay que meterse, porque aquí me rompen algo dentro y me queda aquí, ¿o no? Otra vez me tiraron el tubo de gasoil. Vale. Y aquí no hay que meterse.
¿Y ahora podemos volver a subir de aquí hasta el ferry?
Hasta el ferry, sí. ¿Dónde me paro? Vienen como moscas.
The Europeans want us to share the responsibility of being police. They say, keep your kids in your own country, keep your poverty, keep... But the North has a responsibility towards the South. They can't expect us just to play the role of police. We need investment from rich countries here in the field of education.
European television networks bring the Western standard of living into every Moroccan home. Europe becomes a dream. Aksa is 48 years old and has 5 children. Her second son left 3 years ago by hanging on to the anchor of a ferry. Now he's in Barcelona. Even though he has no legal residence papers and no stable job, he's become the mainstay of the family economy.
وكيجي العيد كيصيفطنا كيجي المولد كيصيفطنا اي موسم زعما كيصيفطنا شي بركه عندنا دستيتو كيقولوا خايصيفط للسبردينه صيفط للحوايج صيفط للنقره ما كيجي العيد كيقول لهم ماشي الحولي كبير يخيول احسن حنا قلنا مساكن دراوج كنعيدوا بالخريفه قديده ولا الجدي ولا معزه ولا دابا الحمد لله شويه.
The Hamadi's children grew up with a father who was unemployed and a mother who had to bring up the children and support the family. The children, like many others in Morocco, are disorientated by the lack of a powerful father figure in what is still a very traditional society.
The factories don't provide enough work for the men. Women are given jobs because they get paid a lot less here in Morocco. A lot of factories are taking on kids. I'm talking about European companies. So Europe must bear part of the blame. When women and boys have to support the family, the father loses his role. Kids find it easier to leave home because their fathers don't wield the power they used to.
خيري واش غنمشي نعمل معاه انا غنمشي نصيفط انا صيفط من الخيري وانا حياتي كامله طيحت عليهم انا حمقى نمشي والله وخلاني ساليش لا كدي لا ديك العقل ديالك باقي صغير عقلك باقي خاوي اسكت شوف لا بحال كبير يقدر يخدم ما كاين مشكل بالحق هذا ما نصيفطوش انا حماق حياتي كامله وانا كنجري عليهم عاد دابا عاود نصيفط انا السباني تما نتعلم اللورديناتور كل حنا نتعلموا وكاين فلوس خاصك غير فلوس هنا وكاين كلشي حتى هنا كاين اللي بغيتي تعلم تعلموا والله اسبانيول ولا العربيه طلعتنا برا ما مشينا ندخل ولد حبيبي
When it stopped and I got down from the coach, it was very cold. Well, I started walking even though it was night, and then when dawn came and it got a little warmer, I went into any old place and slept anywhere I could. By the third, fourth day, I had calluses on my feet. My shoes were worn out. I was barefooted. No, we didn't steal. We'd go into large supermarkets and come out with a full stomach, somewhere different every day. When I got to Barcelona, I said to someone, "Hey, I just got here, and I don't know anyone." He said, "Sure, you can come with me to the place where I sleep." So I went with him, and he took me to this old dilapidated house that they were fixing. We climbed up some scaffolding that was over here and got in through the window.
Plaça Catalunya is the kids' first stop. Then they move on to Plaça Real. A lot of children know each other from Tangiers. The third meeting point is George Orwell Square. The first nasty surprise for the children is finding out that minors are not allowed to work in Spain. These kids come from a country where they've been part of the labour market for years and are treated like adults. Suddenly they find themselves as children in a foreign country. They're used to living on the street and choose which one they want to live on. Currently there are some 70 to 100 street kids in Barcelona.
When I was in Morocco, I thought I'd get papers and work as soon as I got to Spain. When you see people coming back to Morocco in cars, you get the idea that there's tons of money to be made in Spain. But I had a very hard time when I got there. I was hungry, cold, and I started stealing.
You can't last long on the streets because you can get hooked on drugs, solvents, pills and other things. We want to get off the streets, find a job and have papers. We don't want to spend our whole lives on the street.
Sniffing glue and solvents is a common addiction among North African street kids. It's a form of escape from a hostile, cruel environment. These substances wreak terrible harm on the children.
Drugs help you to forget you're hungry and cold and give you courage to adapt to appalling circumstances. It's a way to forget reality and everything around you. It's what